All right, are you ready to unpack this listener story? It's called The Hidden Attic, and it's pretty disturbing. Family secrets, a mysterious attic, a young woman named Lorna, and a horrifying discovery. This isn't just a ghost story, though. It really makes you think about grief and denial and how much darkness can be hidden in families that seem totally normal.
You're right. It digs into how people behave under intense pressure, how trauma can shape you, and how even the most normal person can have a scary, dark side.
Let's get into it. Our story begins with Lorna, who goes through a lot of loss really early in life. First her mother when she's just 6, then her little brother Eric. He was only 5, just 3 years later. It's hard to imagine how much grief like that can impact someone so young.
It is, and we can see the effect it has on Lorna's father. He completely withdraws, becomes emotionally distant, like a ghost. He tells Lorna they need to just move on, but how can you just move on from losing people you love like that, especially when you're still figuring out how to cope with it all?
Exactly. And this is where things get really strange. Lorna spends a weekend with her grandparents, and when she gets back home, something's different. The attic door, the one to that dusty old space full of childhood memories, it's gone, vanished.
What's so weird is that her father completely denies that there's even an attic. He says it's just structural space, insulation and wires. But Lorna knows the door was there, and now it's not. This is where the doubt and suspicion start to creep in. This isn't just a parent forgetting or the house being remodeled. Lorna even describes a blank spot on the ceiling where the door used to be. This constant unsettling reminder that something isn't right. Like the secrets and the denial are becoming a physical part of their lives.
Yeah, and instead of explaining things or comforting her, her father just insists that she shouldn't be worried, which, for a kid who's already dealing with loss and confusion, that kind of denial from a trusted figure can be really damaging.
Absolutely. It's similar to a tactic called gaslighting. It's where someone manipulates you into doubting your own sanity, your own perceptions. If you grow up in that kind of environment, it can really mess with your sense of reality. You start questioning your own memories and instincts.
So we fast forward 13 years. That vanished attic door is still haunting Lorna. She tries to bury the memory, focus on school and other stuff, but that blank ceiling is always there. It's this unspoken reminder that something's wrong.
Right. It's like a physical reminder of the trauma that she's buried, those unanswered questions, no closure about that attic. It all festers under the surface and affects her relationship with her father, her whole sense of well-being.
You can definitely see the strain on their relationship. Her father becomes even more withdrawn, his behavior more and more unsettling. He breaks up with his girlfriend, Jenna. He gets even colder. It's like the unresolved grief and the constant denial are eating him up, turning him into someone Lorna doesn't even recognize.
It fits with what we often see with people who are struggling with buried trauma. Instead of dealing with their pain in a healthy way, they bury it deep down where it festers and turns into something unhealthy, emotional detachment, anger issues, even self-destructive behavior.
And then one night, everything changes. Lorna wakes up. She hears these sounds coming from above, heavy creaking like something's moving around up there in the space her father claims doesn't exist.
That taps into such a primal fear. It's like that monster in the closet idea, but even worse. It violates your sense of safety, the realization that even your own home might be hiding threats. For Lorna, who's already carrying the weight of her father's lies, this just shatters what little security she was holding on to.
She spent years trying to suppress those fears, those unsettling memories. But this time, something snaps. Years of denial, that gut feeling that her father's hiding something truly awful. It all pushes her to a breaking point.
A classic example of a delayed reaction. Years of fear and uncertainty building up, and finally she can't ignore it anymore.
Lorna grabs a hammer, and she makes a choice that changes everything. She smashes through that ceiling, determined to find out what's hidden up there.
It's like she's breaking through all the layers of deceit and lies that have been suffocating her. She's taking back control, refusing to be a victim anymore.
And what she finds in that hidden attic is far worse than anything she could have imagined. It's not insulation and beams. Instead, it's a scene out of a nightmare. Bodies wrapped in plastic, the smell of decay filling the air.
The attic, it used to be full of happy childhood memories. Now it's a tomb. It reflects how broken their family has become, how their lives have been poisoned by secrets and lies. It's like her father's corruption has taken physical form, a space where his darkness has been allowed to grow unchecked.
Lorna's discovery isn't just a confirmation of her worst fears. It's like she stepped into a realm of pure horror. And among the bodies, she sees Jenna, her father's ex-girlfriend.
That's the moment any hope that her father was just eccentric or messed up from grief goes out the window. Jenna's body being there shows just how much danger Lorna has been in, how close the darkness has been all along.
But there's something else in that attic, something that makes Lorna's blood run cold. A shrine. It's set up in the back. 2 large crates, like coffins, and candles all around them. This suggests there's more to this than just murder. There's something ritualistic going on, an obsession with death. It just adds another layer of terror to an already horrific scene.
It pushes the story beyond a typical crime. The shrine shows premeditation, a calculated descent into darkness. It hints at a mind that's wrestling with forces we can't even understand.
Yet to make matters worse, Lorna's father is missing. He vanished without a trace.
His disappearance brings up so many questions. Where did he go? What's he planning to do? Is he running? Or is he hiding somewhere, watching, waiting to strike again? The not knowing makes it even more terrifying. We're left with this awful feeling that the danger isn't over, that this is far from the end of the story.
Yeah, it really feels like the danger might not be over. Lorna's father is still out there, and we have no idea what he's going to do next. His actions are getting more and more disturbing.
It's truly frightening. And what makes it even worse is that the threat is coming from someone she should have been able to trust completely, someone who was supposed to protect her.
This case is a real psychological puzzle. You can't just label Lorna's father as a simple villain. He's clearly battling his own demons, shaped by loss and consumed by something much darker than just grief.
You mentioned earlier that there were some unsettling things in Lorna's childhood, even before her mother and brother died. That image of the eyes watching her through the cracked door, the memory of her father just standing there as she almost drowned. Those details might seem small, but they add another layer to the story. Exactly. Those seemingly insignificant details actually form a pattern of disturbing behavior, a history of trauma that goes beyond the obvious tragedies. It paints a picture of a man who might have been struggling with his dark side long before his wife and son passed away.
Like a slow-burning fuse that's finally reached the explosion.
That's a good way to put it. Those early experiences, the feeling of being watched, the sense that her father wasn't really there to protect her, they plant the seeds of fear and mistrust that grow into full-blown terror as she gets older. She never had that secure attachment that's so important for a child's development. Instead, she was left with this constant feeling of unease and vulnerability.
Which brings us back to the biggest mystery of the story. Those 2 coffin-like crates surrounded by candles in the attic. What do you make of that detail?
The coffin is such a powerful symbol, right? It represents death, the end. But the candles, the flickering light, they hint at something more. A ritual, maybe a fascination with the afterlife, or an attempt to control it.
It's like the shrine, as you called it, adds a whole other dimension to the horror. It's not just about the bodies, the murders. It speaks to something much deeper and darker. It suggests a mind that's lost its grip on reality.
Exactly. It makes you question his motives. Is he just a killer driven by some urge we don't understand, or is there something more going on? Is he trying to connect with the dead, trying to preserve them in some twisted way? The ritualistic elements suggest he wants to control life and death, something that's ultimately beyond human power.
It's a terrifying thought. And then there's the fact that her father is missing. He disappears right when Lorna discovers the truth. Is he running? Or is he lurking out there somewhere, watching, waiting to strike again?
It's the uncertainty that makes this story so unsettling. We're left to fill in the blanks ourselves. Imagine the worst possible outcome.
It's like the story itself is a hidden attic, full of dark corners and terrifying possibilities. We're peering into the darkness, but we can never be sure what we'll find. This case goes beyond a typical crime. We're dealing with deep psychological issues, a man whose grief and denial have turned him into something monstrous.
And that's what makes a truly great horror story. It doesn't rely on cheap scares or gore. It taps into our deepest fears, the things that keep us up at night, that unsettling feeling that something's wrong, even when you can't quite explain it.
Like the monster under the bed, but so much worse.
You got it. And for Lorna, the monster isn't some shadowy figure. It's someone she thought she knew. Someone she should have been able to love and trust. Someone who was supposed to protect her. That betrayal, the shattered trust, that's what makes the story so horrifying. It forces us to face the fact that evil can hide behind a familiar face.
It makes you question everything you think you know about the people you're closest to. Makes you wonder what secrets might be lurking beneath the surface of even the most normal-seeming lives.
It's a scary thought for sure, but it's also a reminder that we're all capable of darkness. Even the most loving families can have hidden depths, unspoken truths that can have devastating consequences. It reminds us to be vigilant, to trust our instincts when something feels off.
So where do we go from here? We have a missing father, a terrified young woman, and so many unanswered questions. What happens next in this story?
It's a question that stays with you, isn't it? We've explored the psychology of it all, how grief and denial can twist your perception and lead you down dangerous paths. But the mystery is still there. What will happen to Lorna? Will she ever be able to heal? And what is at the root of her father's darkness?
Okay, so we're back and still trying to process the hidden attic. It's really shaken me up, to be honest. I mean, it's one thing to hear about these kinds of horrors from a distance, but then you get into the details, the reality of what Lorna went through, and it's just unbelievably disturbing.
It really does make you question your own sense of safety. The thought that something so dark could be hidden right there, in plain sight, it's a deeply unsettling idea.
Yeah, you think of your home as a safe place. You think the people you love would never hurt you. But this story shows us how easily those assumptions can be shattered.
It's a powerful reminder that evil doesn't always announce itself. It can be hiding behind a mask of normalcy, behind a familiar face, waiting for the right moment to show its true colors.
And that brings us back to Lorna, sitting in that police station trying to process the unimaginable, betrayed by her own father, the person who should have been her protector. And now she's left to deal with the aftermath, with the terrifying uncertainty of what might happen next.
It's incredible that she's even made it this far, to endure years of emotional neglect, that gut feeling that something was terribly wrong, and then to face the horrific truth about her father. It shows incredible strength and resilience.
And yet, even after all that trauma, she found the courage to act, to break through that ceiling, both literally and figuratively, to expose the darkness that had taken root in her own home.
That act of defiance, her refusal to be silenced, it's like a beacon of hope in this dark story. It shows that even in the face of unimaginable evil, the human spirit can fight back. Seek justice. Take back control.
It's a powerful message, and one that we should all remember. We may not all face horrors like Lorna did, but we all have our own struggles, our own battles to fight. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to face the darkness head on. Shine a light on the things that scare you the most.
You're absolutely right. Facing the darkness is the first step towards healing and growth. And it's important to remember that we don't have to do it alone. There are people who care, people who will listen, people who will help us find our way through the dark and back into the light.
That's such an important thing to remember, especially when the world feels so chaotic and uncertain. So if you're out there listening and you're dealing with your own hidden attic, please know that you're not alone. Reach out for help and don't ever give up hope.
And remember, even in the darkest night, there's always a flicker of light. A spark of resilience that can lead us to a brighter future. Sometimes that spark comes from within, and sometimes it comes from the kindness and support of others.
Well, thank you for joining us on this unsettling journey into the hidden attic. And listeners, if you have your own story to share, maybe a strange or unnerving experience that's left you with more questions than answers, we want to hear from you. Share your tales in the comments. We're always fascinated by the strange and unexplained. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and maybe take a moment to appreciate the safety and security of your own surroundings.